So I'm going to make a tentative start on getting some 3D shapes and some shadows on my pebbles, and I'm just going to start top left because that suits me. If you're left-handed, you might want to start over on the right. So I'm going to use this Elegant Writer, which is a black pen that changes to sort of pink and turquoise when it's wetted. But because I quite like that sort of planty looking material overlapping it, I don't want to do a complete outline. I want to miss a bit out. The other thing I need to do is I need to wet some other stuff at the same time, because once you've wetted this pen line, if you get more water on the line because you've painted very close to it, you will then get it going lighter, that the ability of the pen to, or the ink in the pen to bleed into two different colours remains, and so you end up with a grey, which might be fine, but you might also lose some of the bright colours that you were hoping to get. So I need to make a sort of commitment now to this top area. So that any water that spreads around will be already touching something that I want it to touch, if that makes sense. So I really am committed to these shapes now, no matter what, but I'm not going to wet them all. I'm just going to use a small brush, the number 0 at the moment, and tentatively apply some water to the line. So it's creating its own shadow because I'm doing it on damp and I'm pulling the colour out, and I can just pull that out to there, add a bit more water and just soften it, and that now looks, that area there looks as if it's behind or under the stone or the pebble. I'm going to do the same here. So I'm touching the brush, touching the paper with the tip of my brush, touching the brush onto the inky line, and then encouraging it to spread a bit by going like that. So you can keep wetting onto the line or next to the line, and you've now got a nice little shadow. It's not changing colour particularly, but that's not surprising because there are a lot of other colours already on there. So this is now giving the effect of a shadow on the rock. And you can see now it is changing colour. There's a bit of pink and turquoise coming through. So I'm just going to pull it out with a damp brush until it sort of practically turns to nothing. And I think at the moment that shape looks quite 3D. So I've sort of got there. And then I need to soften that edge as well. Even when it's dry, you can re-wet this pen line and keep doing things to it, which is why it's a live line. You know, you can't keep splashing stuff around that you don't want near it because it'll make it go grey rather than stay these lovely colours. So I'm really happy with that top corner. Perhaps you're going to say, well, she's easily pleased, but I've used this kind of pen quite a bit for other projects, so I'm kind of used to the way it behaves. And if you want to try one out and you're in the classroom with me, I will have one for you to try, and I have a couple to sell, and if more are needed I can order some more for another time. But the pens last well because you're not using a lot of ink. So I'm starting to create my own little story here. Really loving what's happening there. Remember, you can go over anything again with a black waterproof pen and it won't cause any harm. Anything that's not waterproof, you'll have to consider what effect it might have if you add more later. I'm now making this pebble look slightly 3D by taking the black line onto it as well as under it or next to it. Wow. And you can see how flat it looks when you don't wetten the edge. So this particular overlap here looks very flat because it's just a line. I'm being a little bit bolder with how much water I'm putting on now, so I get a nice flow straight away. But you do have to bear in mind what's happening either side of the outline. And I think just creating some sort of shadow does create, I think, a feeling of depth and 3D, particularly if you soften it, so you gradually, like a graded wash, gradually blend it out. Now if you wanted the highlight on that pebble to be smaller, you can still go back and wet the area again, and it keeps on creating tone. So the alternative to this is to use your dark mix. So there's some dark blue, there's a dark blue on my colour chart which you could use instead. This stone can just go completely dark. It's buried in the shadow of the other one, but you can still see the outline. And I just need to soften this edge a little bit more with a damp brush, and it's still spreading. So when you just touch the tip of the brush and the outside edge of that pen line, it just bleeds out. But again, if you want a 3D effect, I can probably dip into some of this stuff here and just create it by dipping into the ink that's still wet on that very dark hidden pebble there. This line now needs to be softened a bit. So I'm kind of assuming that the light's coming more or less from above. So that's how I'm getting this feeling of 3D, is by putting things either in front or behind each other. So this is an overlap. This is in front of this one's in front of that one's in front of this one. If you think that the dark area is too heavy, you can take a paper towel, like in that middle bit, you might think, well, that's getting a bit too much, and you can reduce it. And you can put a bit of a damp paper towel on and take a bit more off. So it will go a lighter grey when it's dry. So if you've never used these pens before, it's worth practicing. If you do have one, or ask me to get one for you, it's worth practicing on an unimportant piece of work initially, until you've got used to the way they behave. I certainly don't go sort of clomping in with a great big brush when I'm doing delicate things like this. Got quite a lot of dark here, so I'm just going to spread that with my damp brush and turn it into a shadow. So it's rather like using paint, but it's an ink that's not waterproof. That's the thing to remember, is it will carry on. If you wanted to add some colour now to one of these stones, you'd have to bear in mind that wetting the stone with paint, or wetting it and then putting paint on, will actually give you more grey, because the coloured effect will change again. So I'm quite happy with what I'm doing now, and I think you're probably getting a good idea. And when you're with me in the classroom, obviously I can give you help and advice on how yours might work in a similar way, depending on what sort of composition you've gone for. But I shall carry on working round and then take a photograph.